Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the Marketing Association. My day job is I run Did It. Most people know Did It as a search marketing agency, but we've made 11 acquisitions to become a full service agency. I also have a nonprofit called Giving Forward that is in the cause marketing space. Today, I'm chatting with Kevin Krim of Edo. Pleasure to catch up with him. But before we dive into Edo, actually, I'd love to have you talk about your nonprofit venture, the Choose Creativity initiative, which is part of the Lulu and Leo Fund.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me. It's great to see you, and great to talk with you. And yeah, I mean, my wife Marina and I, we lost our daughter Lulu and our son Leo in a terrible tragedy in October of 2012. And in the aftermath of that, it was as bad or worse than you could imagine. And yet we had to take care of our surviving daughter, Nessie, who was only not even 4 years old at the time. We had to take care of each other, our marriage, and we were surviving and eventually thriving again because of the creativity, the creative mindset that we brought to everything we did. And we didn't have the words for it at the time, but Marina is a teacher, trained teacher. She got her master's in arts education, and it was sort of a natural evolution for the Lulu and Leo Fund, which we always knew we wanted to honor the sort of lives of Lulu and Leo and the creativity through which they lived and we raised them. But we didn't have like a structure really for it until we started putting onto paper the principles of creativity, how we were doing it. People would ask us those questions of like, how are you getting through all this? How are you doing what you do? And we really were at first struggling for those words, but we did crystallize them into this program called Choose Creativity. And it's equal parts choose and creativity. The first and very important part is that we all have a choice how we respond to crises, to adversity, to trauma, and to opportunities and the good things that come to you in life. You have a choice of whether you respond with that creative mindset, with that ability to say, I can affect positive change on the world around me, on how I approach things. And those principles, whether it's patient or intuitive, authentic, resourceful, unconventional, inventive, those are all these things that you can work on. You can practice them, you can build them, or you can let them wither and shrink. And so we've turned that into a set of professional development courses for teachers, in-school teachers, for after-school instructors. Our core target is, obviously kids in very tough circumstances where they're facing a ton of adversity in their daily lives, right? The trauma of violence, racism, of inequities that are in our world. That's our core audience. We, for example, in New York City, this unprecedented summer rising program where the city is basically offering no cost, full all day summer school for hundreds of thousands of kids and their families in school and after school. They 13 different programs have turned to us to train their staff on how they can bring Choose Creativity and these principles into the full day that they're putting these kids through in their summer rising program. Super proud that we're able to serve thousands and thousands of kids that way. We also do it for corporations, and we take corporate professionals through a sort of workplace version of Choose Creativity. We piloted that with a great organization called ASCAP. It's the rights management organization for art, recording artists and composers and performers. And we've scaled that up to serve a huge organization like ASCAP, and we're rolling that out to corporate clients around the country. So it's an exciting time for the fund and for Choose Creativity. It's also an important time. I mean, creativity is at a premium in this kind of world that we're in right now, right? There's these huge forces of automation that are going on in our lives because of the computing power that's being brought to bear. And it puts all this pressure on our workforce to be more creative or become irrelevant. And, you and I both know, running companies, we need creative teams, right? And so if we're not building the future workforce that's more creative, then we've got a structural problem in the whole sort of societal fabric of how we're going to come at this. So I think it's really important, and we're getting great feedback from it. So it's been a really, I think it's really been a beautiful and meaningful thing for Marina and I, and all of the people that now support the Lulu and Leo Fund. So thank you for asking about it.
No, that's very inspirational, and glad that you're stepping into what is perhaps a little bit of a void there with regards to empowering teachers to teach that or and allow people to learn directly.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Creativity obviously comes in many forms. A lot of people think about it from sort of the arts education perspective, but as a multi-platform inventor, my creativity comes out in different ways, right? Or just strategic creativity with regards to business. Those are all things people can learn and can get better at.
What you're doing with Giving Forward is extremely creative, and that is a key point that we make every time when we're talking to a new group of people about choose creativity. Is this is not simply about art. In fact, a lot of what we were responding to is the small box that some people want to put creativity into. Frankly, our education system tends to do that too. And kids start off incredibly creative, and it declines as they go through formal education. And right. And then they get into the workforce, and we really don't do much to support creativity in the workforce either. And yet we know that entrepreneurship is supremely creative. And the problem solving that lawyers, doctors, engineers, accountants, well, creative accounting is maybe not good, but but you know what I mean, that like all these fields that aren't traditionally thought of as creative, they reward creativity, both on a success level, but also on a personal meaning level, right? It gives you a greater meaning in the work you're doing.
Right. As an interesting sort of transition to your day job, one of the things I think the auction model of media, which has sort of taken over from the old days back when insertion orders were, if you buy more, you get it cheaper, to now where the more you buy, the more expensive it gets.
Yeah.
It's actually put a huge premium on creativity in the more traditional sense, right? Meaning that, if you can get the right message to the right audience at the right time and get them to pay attention, right? That will make you able to afford more media or more expensive media. And if you can't get those messages out there, you can't afford the media, right? So, while a lot of the agency world decouples media buying from creative, the reality is they're now inexorably linked, because you can't afford expensive media unless your creative is good. So
I completely agree, and I think the most successful media agencies like what you're doing at Did It. There's an EDO client called Camelot down in Dallas. They, the way the best media agencies are working now is incredibly creative. The lines are very blurry between strategy, brand strategy, creative strategy, media strategy, right? There is this sense that if you're not being creative and thinking holistically about the whole problem and the whole solution, then you're going to have a tough time. And the mechanism you're describing in search marketing, that auction model that then migrated to programmatic, broadly defined, right? That is coming to convergent TV, and that is one of the core sort of strategic theses that we at EDO we embraced from day one. It requires patience, which is another one of the creative principles in choose creativity, by the way, because patience, it's as much about fostering the conditions for success of your idea as it is for waiting, and sort of digging in and just trying harder, right? And so you got to foster these conditions. And we think that one of the things holding TV back has been this sort of vicious cycle of using the thinking about the metrics and the goals both kind of being wrong. And there's this moment in Moneyball, the book or the movie, choose your favorite form of consumption of it. Most people relate more to the Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill, characters than the book. And there's that moment when the Jonah Hill character is trying to get the job with Brad Pitt, and he says, all right, here's the core problem. The core problem is that the people running baseball teams, they think about buying players, but they shouldn't be thinking about buying players. They should be thinking about buying wins. And if you want to buy wins, you got to buy runs. And if you want to buy runs, you got to think about which players generate incremental runs relative to their cost, right? That's the way you change your success. And, you replace the words and it describes traditional TV buying perfectly, right? People are thinking about buying reach, but that's not what they're really trying. They should be trying to buy revenue.
Yeah.
They should be trying to buy incremental revenue.
It was even better.
Right. And if you want to buy incremental revenue, you gotta drive people into your funnel. You got to drive engagement with your brand, right? You got to drive performance. And so reach is like the second or third degree proxy for what you're trying to achieve. But if you're chasing reach in this marketplace that's highly disrupted, where the gross rating points are shrinking, and yes, we're all talking about how, post-COVID, this upfront was sold out faster than any upfront ever. Well, it's partly because the inventory has shrunk so much.
Right.
And the costs are going up on any kind of equivalent basis. But if you want to keep thinking about reach as your goal, you're going to have to chase more expensive reach into very fragmented, very hard to reach, streaming environments. And these streaming environments, their prices are responding by just going up more. And so you're in this vicious cycle right now where something's got to give. And we think it's how you think about the combination of what your goals really are, how you measure those goals, and then how you structure your media planning and your whole creative strategy around that.
Yeah, I think it is really fascinating. And in particular, CTV and addressable TV, in particular addressable when you're talking about set-top boxes and such, and sort of similar, channels where the player is identified to an individual or a household. You've got targeting erosion in certain channels, like the third-party cookie. Now we got another year out of it, kick the can down the road. Yeah. With Apple and mobile IDs no longer allowing for a behavioral level of targeting, oddly enough, some of the TV channels are layering in targeting, extra targeting, and allowing for almost PII or anonymized PII level tracking as well, which is sort of interesting because we're losing fidelity on one side of the marketplace and gaining fidelity on the other, and I think you guys are really well positioned from that perspective.
Yeah, and we feel like our reason to exist is to help the sellers as much as the buyers, right? Everyone's if the system is done right, and this is where I think inspiration from search is really important, because the system is very fair. Yes, there's ways to game it, but essentially that auction model is a very fair way of thinking about the balanced risk between the seller and the buyer, right? And both sides kind of bearing just a little bit of the risk, but really letting the auction sort out, what's the most efficient use of every bit of inventory, which in the case of search is every single search, right? And so, the opportunity when you get the measurement right and the ad sort of yield management systems right, you can start to build a truly fair and effective marketplace where the fair price is being realized every impression, right? The true fair value of the inventory is being realized. And that's going to be good for the publishers. It's going to be good for the advertising buyers, whether it's an agency or a brand direct. And ultimately, it's great for the consumer and the content creators. And that was always a big part of what EDO wanted to do is, we all care a lot about the creative experience, right? That we serve the film studios, the streaming studios, the TV networks. And at the end of the day, we love TV, we love movies, we love entertainment, and more efficient marketing, more efficient advertising as a business model to support creative people and the creative output of what they do is a good thing. it's a great thing for everyone. And we think that's that's the ultimate mission we have when we think about what's EDO trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I mean, you think about when we were kids, how many denture cream and diaper ads we saw when we were not in market for either of those two things, right? And as you add addressability and targeting, the overall yield should go up, right? As people get to see more of what is actually, in fact, relevant for them, because that's when media buyers are willing to pay more for that inventory. There was always waste in every media buy, and there still is, right? But the extent to which you can start to cherry pick, it creates a rising tide for the publisher and content creator as well. So
Yeah.
it really is a win-win for everybody if you can put the systems in place and make them easy enough that a media buyer can actually do it, right? Which can also be part of the challenge, right? As it needs to be easy enough that an underpaid 23-year-old media buyer can actually implement it in a plan.
That's right. I do think there's a couple points in there that I want to really key off of. Some of the inventory and the mass reach, the mass targeting that traditional linear TV delivers is not always a bad thing, right? I mean, yes, there's an ad for a new hybrid or electric truck from Ford. There's only so many people who are going to be in market for that, even if you kind of zoom out to the next 9 months or 12 months, right? There's only a limited number, but there's also a lot of people who influence those kind of purchases.
Right.
And then there's a lot about the social brand value, badge value that these brands want to achieve, and that sort of social permission to spend a bunch of money on a new truck. And so there is a reason that a Ford or a Toyota wants to reach a lot of people with the same message all at once. And so, live sports, live news, live big events, they're all going to have a place in this media ecosystem for a very long time. And I do think, that yield management view is going to have to be very carefully stewarded by the big media companies, because they, between what they get paid by, a Ford or a Toyota, and what they'd get paid by every bidder on all those impressions on a targeted basis, that yield is a tricky thing to manage. I was at Yahoo when we went through a very tough transition where the Yahoo homepage went from sort of like that mass sponsorship sale to just really an automated yield management type system with the right media acquisition. And that was a rough transition for Yahoo, because you didn't necessarily have the auction depth yet, and therefore the pressure on pricing to get that maximal yield. So that's a wonky thing. That's for insiders, like us to worry about, but it does matter to get that right. I do think also the media planning experience needs to be more software driven, right? Those media planners have too much on their plates. The media buyers, right? It's too complex of a landscape already, and they can't try to do this by hand. And I think they all know that, but we need to recognize that as an industry, build for that reality where these old ways of thinking about, again, the goals, the data that reflects those goals, and the software systems that actually implement them, they're going to have to be built together so that you get to this new place in a way that's effective, that's successful.
It sounds like, in order to not make it over centralized, where basically the big gorillas in the space sort of control everything at the center, because they're the only way that a media buyer can sort of spend a lot of money at once, right? You want to obviously create more of an open framework, but the RTB specs, right? If you want to go down that rabbit hole, at least there was sort of a common industry agreement on them, right? So it allowed for lots of players, but that hasn't really happened to the same extent yet in OTT, right? Where sort of frameworks are sort of evolving to the point where everyone can agree, like to make it easy, to make it software driven, right? We all have to sort of agree on the same data exchange, right? And definitions really more than anything, right?
Yeah, and there are some there are some valiant efforts going on that are making headway on this front. It's not easy.
Right.
Whether it's Project OR, which is working on addressability standards, whether it's OpenAP for, the sort of the problem of inventory visibility and transacting. There's a lot of good work being done. But I do think, we know how this play ends, right? We know that it goes from closed to open. We know that it goes from centralized sort of oligopolies and cartels to to distributed and decentralized and very competitive. We see all that. It doesn't always end cleanly, right? And sometimes the end is elusive. I mean, we see evolutions of walled gardens that are happening on smart TVs that are echoes of the walled gardens that we've seen in social, certainly, and we see sort of still coming up because of privacy issues, all that. So it is a messy world, but we know that the sort of arc of history is such that this ends in a place where, like all the digital ad marketplaces have ended, it's got to be driven by performance-based outcomes, right? Like reaching the right number of people is just a step on the path to getting to the ultimate outcome, which is successful sales and profitably growing businesses, right? That's why we're here. And so the industry needs to see that that's the end point.
Have you seen somewhat of what they call the flight to quality, right? With regards to quality content, obviously you've got, certain platforms which are a little bit like the Wild West, like you never really know what your ad will be up against or next to, adjacent to. And then you've got obviously a lot of the folks that I think are in your ecosystem, which are the professional content creators, right? And that you would certainly put them in the bucket of sort of in a flight to quality. They would be in the quality bucket, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, media buyers have been willing to pay a bit of a premium, right, for that flight to quality within certain ecosystems in particular, because there's less likely to be bots and fraud, et cetera, as well. So have you seen sort of within the agencies that you're working for, sort of this flight to quality?
Absolutely. I mean, foremost, I mean, we at EDO are very focused on the convergent TV landscape, which we define, and I think a lot of people agree with this definition, as any premium TV quality programming that's got non-skippable ads in it. So that's linear and all these OTT and other non-linear ways people want to consume TV quality programming. And, that is generally still viewed as a separate buy by all the agencies and brands that we work with.
Right.
They view that as that's the best stuff. And they want to allocate as much money as they can reasonably to that pool of dollars, because they can tell sight, sound, and motion stories with very little, doubt about the content it's up against and the validity of the sort of ad impressions there. There's very little fraud or sort of bot traffic in there, as you noted. And then you contrast that with the rest of it, where, I mean, there's a whole ecosystem built up of ad verification, right? Where just Moat, IAS, Double Verify, right? I mean, we thought that market had seen its high point when Moat was acquired by Oracle for such a big number, but then here we are, years later, and Double Verify and IAS just both go public in the last month and are, valued in multi-billion-dollar valuations. So, that's not necessarily, I mean, good for them. That's what great businesses, but that's not a great reflection of the quality of,
Right.
of the overall, sort of digital ad ecosystem, when you need such huge companies just to verify that this isn't fraudulent, right? That it's viewable and non-fraudulent. So I think convergent TV is in a much better place. The big problem with convergent TV is just knowing where it ends up, the impression ends up being served, because you can buy it in a bunch of different ways. You can buy it through the exchanges. You can buy it through the media owners. You can buy it through the streaming platforms. You can buy it through the cable companies, and their addressable inventory, right? It's a really big and very confusing space of how you buy it. And then where those ads end up getting delivered is also a big question mark for folks. So we're trying to provide, first and foremost, visibility, and then helping you understand, improve performance, and then help you do something about it. But that first part of just being able to see it is not to be trivialized. It is a huge thing to just know where is my delivery? How am I, how am I both, where am I being delivered? How am I pacing on my delivery? How much of that reach and frequency is truly incremental, and how much of it is, duplicated, et cetera, is I think a big problem to start with.
Yeah, that's really cool. You just also made me think about the early days of cable, right?
Yeah.
So, what obviously happened in the early days of cable is a lot of additional inventory, particularly fragmented inventory, came online at the same time. And so it sort of was a boon to the infomercial market, for lack of a better term, right? Which is direct response TV. And not that that inventory at 3 o'clock in the morning was bad in any way, right? But it's just like there weren't people waiting in line to buy it, right?
Yeah.
And so do you see a portion of the sort of OTT and CTV ecosystem that ends up perhaps being less desirable, and therefore ends up in sort of the new version or the new equivalent of true performance-based video advertising, where the the Dollar Shaves Club, the next Dollar Shave Club, will end up there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think not just the sort of OTT market, but the entire convergent TV marketplace is trending more towards direct to consumer, right? And there's conventional, traditional DR type categories that we all think of, and those are thriving in this environment, right? Because it's never been more efficient to be a direct response marketer. But the DTC categories are expanding, right? There are categories that didn't used to be DTC that are now dominated by direct to consumer brands and business models, and convergent TV is great for them, right? And the ability to see what's happening in real time in your funnel that a direct to DR marketer has always had in their blood, right? They've when I was working at LookSmart, harkening back to our shared search days, we had a little subsidiary of Guthrie Ranker's direct response digital business. And I learned a lot from being around those folks, because they are just, methodical about understanding when an ad ran and how that triggered behavioral responses in their funnel, right? Yeah. And that there's a through line from those early infomercial days to the best TV and digital marketers today, where they are just having great visibility into what's happening. They understand how each cohort of leads that they've acquired through different channels, how those are doing in conversion and ultimate lifetime value. And then they are maximizing the buys that have the highest ROI.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it is not what you have to do well in this environment is not different. Those have been true for decades, but right. The how is got to change. And I think there's a ton of inspiration to be had from that DTC world. And what EDO has really done is brought that kind of visibility and granular, understanding of the levers you can pull to maximize your results. We've brought that to brand categories that don't own their funnel data, right? If you're a brand that, has distribution partnerships, that whether it's automotive or entertainment or retail, all these places where you don't really own your own data, because, if you're marketing Barbies to parents and kids as Mattel doesn't know what's happening. Amazon, Walmart, Target, they're the ones who knows what's going on. And so, we at EDO can level the playing field for that kind of brand that wants to understand what's happening in their funnel, even if they don't own their funnel.
Yeah, we had a bunch of those types of advertisers as did clients over the years. And, one of the things, luckily you had them pretty early, because one of the things we learned pretty quickly was that the leading indicator to whether or not your DRTV was working was a surge in search query behavior on your brand.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right?
And EDO's just like automated that collection
Yeah.
for all these brand categories that are advertising on TV. That's exactly it.
So, you'd know whether it was working before the orders came in, just because the search query volume spiked. So we'd have those clients actually give us their media plan and exactly when things would drop, because then we could even bid more aggressively on the generics during those times when the ads were dropping, because the people would end up coming in not just on the brand keywords, but we could be more aggressive. And there's a lot of really fun stuff you can do when you really start to digest in your mind the interaction effects between media channels, right?
Yes.
And search is as much a metric as it is a media channel, right? It ends up being both. You can see the result of other advertising and marketing expenditures, even earned media. You can sort of see it manifest itself in search, and then take advantage of that. So,
but the transition that's still happening, Kevin, is that what you and I have known for a very long time has not really permeated until very recently to the full sort of zeitgeist, right? I mean, but what's great is that there's excellent work being done in a bunch of different circles out of Europe and the US around how search is such a great predictive leading indicator of all of these other things that you're trying to do. So these folks, Les Binet and Mark Riston out of the UK, both are doing separately really interesting research around how share of search is this excellent way of it's a great way of tracking brand health at this point, because it's got that leading indicator value for all the down funnel outcomes that you're trying to drive.
Exactly.
Now, some are even going as far of, and it's an aggressive statement, but that share of search is a better metric to be tracking than share of voice for marketers and agencies in terms of knowing whether or not they're going to hit the market share goals that they have for the brand.
So I would absolutely agree with that, because share of voice, regardless of whether you measure it based on a total reach and frequency basis, or you use dollars as a proxy for that, like they all assume everyone's a really good media buyer, and we know better than that, right? So, but whereas search is a byproduct of the consumer's behavior, right?
Yeah.
So that it doesn't happen unless somebody got a touch point that worked. They don't sit bolt upright at 3:00 in the morning and saying, discount Alaskan cruise vacations for gay seniors. Like something caused them to do that, right? And if it was, a Carnival cruise ad, then great, it worked.
Right. And, people say, well, what about all the search that might be happening because of some controversy with the brand, or what about search that's happening because people are curious about the music in the ad? And first of all, when you do it right, you exclude all that anyway. But that's also all very temporal. And fundamentally, people don't search unless they want to know more. They want to do something with it, right? There's a lot of problems in behavioral. I mean, in attitudinal research that behavioral just fixes, because people are really bad at predicting their own future behavior. We've got all sorts of biases and things that are going on in our head when we try to describe what we're going to do in the future. But we are lazy or efficient creatures, however you want to describe it. And we're not going to lift a finger unless we're motivated.
Yep.
And you see something compelling on, in an ad, and you pick up that whatever device is near you and you start searching for it. That's an incredibly powerful signal of efficacy. And that's the fundamental, I think, shift in what we're saying to the marketplace is possible now with this kind of data at your fingertips.
Yeah, I don't have any data on how effective it is, but I've started to see the resurgence of QR codes that came from menus during the pandemic has actually bled over into TV creative on DR TV creative, right? Where the QR code actually in the ad.
Yeah.
How many people have their phone at their fingertips? I don't know. But I'd love to see some research on that, because it does really close the loop in an interesting way. It
is amazing. I mean, I watched my 6th grade daughter when she started going back to in-person school, and they had to kind of fill out a form every day before they walked into school that said, I haven't had any symptoms and all that. And they would just walk up with their smartphones and hit the QR code and fill out the form. And for, I think my generation, we're thinking like, oh, it's not that hard to just type in a URL, right? But like they've get that, you know, this crisis habituated a bunch of us to using QR codes, whether it was menus or getting into your middle school, you know. So
Right.
it's yeah, no, I think there's going to be lots of those fascinating side effects of all of this that will play out in the advertising creatives. But you know, a side note of that is people often say, well, you know, I'm doing this campaign to change my brand attributes, and I really want to like send a new message to my consumer that, you know, what my brand promises to people. And so I'm not trying to do direct response type goals. And we said, well, you know, the funny thing that we see in the data is that people respond with signals like search incredibly well to pure brand ads.
Yeah.
It's just there's almost a Pavlovian layer to these behavioral responses that we see, where if it's a compelling message, a compelling story, that if the ad is effective, then some of us are just triggered on an almost unconscious level to go find out more.
Yeah, it's a curiosity factor, right? So
Right.
Definitely that's how.
But I would call it consideration. I think curiosity sounds too frivolous, as opposed to like people are like, wait, wow, I want to know more about like whatever that brand story just was, because these brand stories are rarely at this point a purely empty like message of emotion. There's usually something underpinning it about, you know, how that brand is changing their you know, their offer to the consumer. And, you know, whether it's going all electric as an automaker or being more sustainable as a fast food company or whatever, right? Like those things, those are brand ad campaigns that are also triggering consideration and research by consumers who are empowered to know more, and they want to know more. And that is purely a good thing as a marketer, right? That is purely reflective of something that you want to achieve, that changing of hearts and minds. It's reflected in behaviors. Yeah. So I'm just arguing that behavior, you know, like behavior should not be put in that small box of, oh, that's for DR stuff. That's for
no, absolutely.
It's a great way of thinking about brand as well. And search marketing is the capturing of the demand being created by, you know, things like TV.
Yeah, and you know, we tell clients all the time, especially if they've got the budget, is you can't be in the pure demand harvesting mode on search, right? You need to figure out how to move up funnel. And certainly you want to be as efficient as you can up funnel, but you can rely on other people to do the demand creation and just harvest it. But if you really want to build a brand as opposed to just, you know, be a bottom feeder, you're probably going to have to go out and move into mid funnel and upper funnel.
That's right. Amen. That's right.
Well, it was wonderful catching up with you, and I'll be looking forward to see what EDO does. You know, as the marketplace evolves and you plug into, you know, more partnerships, and you do actually add the, you know, improve the layer to make it easier for all the media buyers and planners to do what they need to do. So thank you so much for joining me.
Kevin, thank you. Great talking with you. Let's do it again soon.
Sounds good.